everybody, welcome to the channel. Hey guys, we're your hosts, M and J. Today we're talking about issue 6 of the current Captain Marvel run. Issues 6 and 7 are actually tie-ins to the current Marvel event going on, War of the Realms. We haven't been keeping up with it, so the only thing we actually know about this event is from the inside blurb of this comic. This is probably a way for them to try to get people who are reading Captain Marvel to read War of the Realms, but honestly the only reason why we were reading Captain Marvel was because we thought she would be important to the Endgame movie, but it turns out she wasn't, so we kind of feel cheated. On top of that, if you've seen our other reviews for this series, you'd know we didn't think this comic run was handled very well. The first 5 issues are one story arc, and when it first started we thought it would be about a hero who'd been away in space for quite a while and had to get back into the swing of things on Earth, which is fine, there's a lot you can do with that concept, but instead the end of the first issue took a very different turn. She ends up getting dragged into this post-apocalyptic landscape by a raging misogynist for no explained reason. Well, okay then. But if they're going to commit to this idea, they could have at least explained things properly. A big question that we had is, who exactly is Nuclear Man? He doesn't get much of an introduction. He just shows up at the end of the first issue, causes some trouble, and then kidnaps a reporter. He really doesn't seem like a big deal, to be honest. Almost like any villain could have taken his place. And he doesn't make much of an impact other than being just a raging misogynist. He ends up being the main villain for 5 issues, and during that time we never learn anything else about him. We get small glimpses of his past, like we see that at one time he was actually a doting father. Something must have happened between then and now, but we never learn what. Even a search on Wikipedia didn't lead to anything, so I guess these things were actually new to this comic, but they introduced these concepts and then never did anything with them. And that was really disappointing. He was really one-dimensional for a main villain, and honestly the entire story suffered for it. And then there was Sam, the only male hero on the island, who ended up being our favorite character, mostly because he was the only one that was actually allowed to be a character. His motivations were understandable and he was very believable as a character, while basically everybody else was just there to be Carol's cheerleaders, constantly heaping praise and validation onto Carol, while Captain Marvel herself wasn't that interesting of a character, but we'll get to her in a minute. Back to Sam, I think it would have made a lot more sense for the story to be from his perspective. It would have been really interesting to see the dynamic between Sam and Nuclear Man. What caused Nuclear Man to turn his own son into a living weapon? Did he ever truly love his son, or was he born to be used for something? For example, Sam's name is an acronym for Son of Machis, so Sam doesn't really have a proper identity. Did Nuclear Man have him for some kind of purpose in mind, and Sam just failed that purpose, which is why he abandoned him and turned him into a weapon? Or was it something else? Ultimately, it was pretty obvious there was more to this story, but they never bothered to give it to us. This story also came at a really bad time for Carol. She had just gotten back to superheroing in New York City, and Tony was going on and on about how people really needed to be reintroduced to her, that they didn't trust her and they don't know what to make of her, and she also needs to get used to the city and building relationships with average people and also other heroes. But she got dragged away from all of that because of this weird machismo drama, so instead of dealing with all those struggles, she just gets put into the leadership position by the other women, who kind of just stick her with it. And then they all heap this praise on her because she's the big hero, but that's not really where her character is right now. She just came back from being the big hero in space and also being on sabbatical, so now's the time for her to start getting used to being a hero in a big city that functions normally with average citizens and other heroes and the occasional bad guy that needs to be taken down a few pegs. This is the exact opposite of that, so it doesn't do anything for her character. She doesn't really grow from this experience, and to be honest, it feels like this story exists for the sake of girl power, to have a group of mostly women take down a big chauvinistic man, instead of just having the story exist to tell a story. But as if that wasn't bad enough, she left Sam behind when he was kidnapped by his own father. She doesn't end up looking like a hero in the end because she didn't finish the job. She didn't get everybody out. And ultimately, she doesn't care. She just goes back to her normal life. So now after that extremely unsatisfying story arc, it looks like we might be getting the story we thought we were gonna get in the first place. But now that's on hold because they have to do this tie-in with the War of the Realms. Honestly, we're more interested in getting a satisfying conclusion with the arc that was already told than moving on to some random tie-in event. As for this issue, it's kind of a smaller story, but I'm not surprised by that because it's a tie-in for an event. But with this slow pacing, it probably could have just been a one-shot instead of divided into 2 issues. The story is about Captain Marvel, Black Widow, and Doctor Strange fighting the Enchantress, although for some reason Doctor Strange was left out of the cover. Basically, the Dark Elf King has taken over 9 of the 10 realms, and now he's going after the last realm, Midgard. The Enchantress has taken over South America with her army of the dead, and Winter Soldier and Black Widow are trying to fight her off. Black Widow sees an opening and goes for it, but the Enchantress knocks her back, and somehow they both end up seeing the same vision of the Enchantress being defeated by Doctor Strange, Captain Marvel, and Black Widow. Obviously, the Enchantress isn't happy about this, so she goes after Doctor Strange, and Black Widow decides to get the team together. So she contacts Carol and explains everything that we just saw to her. They meet up in Rio and the two find Doctor Strange. They tell him about the vision, and he's happy to hear that they do defeat her, but he also knows that the Enchantress doesn't want this to happen, so she'll probably be avoiding them. Carol suggests that they just go to Rio because that's where the vision took place in, so maybe fate will just take care of it, which I guess is understandable, and Doctor Strange agrees. But he asks if they're absolutely certain that Rio is where this actually takes place, and they say yes, and he informs them that the Enchantress is standing right behind them. The Enchantress says that she's not gonna wait for Doctor Strange to make his move, so she's just gonna fight them here. So they fight, but it turns out it was actually a trap by the Enchantress, and she ends up body swapping Carol and Strange. I can appreciate that she's actually trying to keep this from happening. It's good to see an active villain. The rest of the comic basically boils down to body swap shenanigans, things we've seen over and over again. There was one personal moment that we liked, where Carol comments on the pain in Stephen Strange's hands, and asks if it's constant. He says that it is, but he's come to accept it, and she sympathizes with him. It was nice to see Carol reach out to somebody. Her character really needed something like this, because she's desperately lacking in empathy. Unfortunately, this was the only personal moment we got, and the rest is all very typical for body swap stories. You'd think they'd have a moment where Doctor Strange is looking at Carol's hands and stretching them out and getting a feel for them, because he hasn't had that in so long. But instead he comments on how powerful Carol's body is, and she yells at him for putting her hands too close to her chest. I'm surprised there wasn't a scene of Carol trying to figure out how to pee standing up. Honestly, they're acting more like teenagers than adults and professionals. After all, Strange has performed surgery. You'd think this kind of awkwardness wouldn't really be that big of an issue for them. They spend what we're told is 6 hours messing around in the jungle, trying to get Carol to undo the spell, but the cloak of levitation keeps hitting her in the face, and Doctor Strange just doesn't understand how she can get anything done with such long hair, all while South America is being ravaged by zombies. But they don't seem too worried about that. Black Widow is just sitting there laughing at all of this. Carol gets offended when Doctor Strange suggests that she's not trying, and they have this big argument about their feelings. Doctor Strange doesn't understand why his powers didn't transfer to her body with him, because he got them through discipline. But Carol says that the Enchantress needed to separate him from his powers. Well, if his powers did transfer with him, then this whole body swap situation wouldn't have mattered. But Black Widow can't take it anymore, and she laughs out loud at them, saying that the Enchantress is a genius for switching the two, which is a little insensitive when South America is being ravaged by zombies. She says the Enchantress body swapped 2 of the biggest jerks and now they have no control at all. She says it's pathetic and they have to get over themselves or else they won't survive the night, and mentions that they're being attacked by zombies as they speak. Strange tells Carol to just try a spell, so she tries to use Harry Potter spells. Obviously that's not going to work, but Carol says she's not picky right now. Strange laments that he doesn't know how Carol's sparkly hands work, and the comic ends with Natasha saying that they're definitely going to die out here. So that's the comic. It didn't really make us interested in War of the Realms, which is kind of bad considering the fact that that was the whole point of this book. It was also pretty predictable, and we're assuming that it was actually Carol who took out the Enchantress in Stephen Strange's body. Hopefully the next issue won't be that predictable, but we're not getting our hopes up either. This whole thing feels like filler, which I guess it kind of is. But to be honest, I'm not as upset with this as I was with the previous arc, which is the story that was actually meant to be told in this series. Overall, it was kind of just bland. Still would prefer to know what happened to our boy. but that's just our opinion. What do you guys think? Honestly, so little happened in this book that there wasn't actually enough to make a full video on it, which is why we spent 5 minutes complaining about everything we didn't like from the first arc in this series. We still think it's relevant though, since there was no real segue between this story and the previous one. It feels like this story was just shoehorned in between the last arc, which didn't have a proper conclusion, and this next arc about the mysterious figure and the Kraken, so this whole thing was just an unsatisfying reading experience. But if you enjoyed this video, you can leave a like and subscribe to this channel for more content like this. And we'll see you in the next video. Bye everyone. Bye guys.